gonna wait a couple minutes to see. Hey Ryan, let people get online here. Wait a few minutes. Hey Sean. Yeah, it's still different, electric. No motor, or no engine. Couple minutes and we'll get going. Just waiting for people. Okay, this is my first time doing this. I had some information I wanted to get across to everybody, and I thought this was the easiest way to do it. So I made a list when I put this out, and we'll just start going through the list, and I'll answer any questions you guys got. So this class is tires, rubber tire, has to be a rubber tire. The body has to cover the tires. They made a rule where some places have any sauce, you can spray stuff on the ground. Majority of where I race, you can't leave a mark on the ground, so you can put anything on the tire, but can't leave anything on the ground for the next guy. And there's rules on wings, but I think that's kind of in the noise. The wings don't make a huge difference. This car, I was kind of going to go over the setup. Before I get into this car though, the main reason for this video, I think that will be the most important, is sauce on the tire. So I wanted to sauce a tire, and then I'll talk about the setups and everything on the list. And then later on, I'll show you how sticky this tire actually is. And I'll tell you what I'm using. So I'm gonna sauce this tire. Hang on, let me get a paper towel. So normally I heat the tire, and it's prepped with like a prep or a sauce that opens the rubber up. So this is cold, unprepped. This is probably the worst condition of the sauce for the tire, and it'll still be crazy sticky. So I want to let that dry for a minute while we talk. So this car, a little bit of a controversy. This is a belt-driven car. It's a Losi car. I'm a huge Losi fan all my life. It started out as a couple different cars. The front end is a 2240. The chassis is short course chassis. Has to be a short course chassis, so it's a short course SCT 22 3.0. And the rear end and drivetrain is off of a Losi 22.4. Four-wheel drive. So shocks are short buggy shocks. Sorry about that, I think I got a phone call. Short buggy shocks, light as possible. I'm running 45 weight oil. Pistons are 1.6, 1.7s, basically what I'd run in off-road. Ride height, this is kind of interesting. So I normally run the front completely compressed, and the ride height's kind of based on the body. So I want the body to be an 1/8 inch off the ground, or really, really close without it rubbing. And then the back, I run completely topped out, just a little bit of travel down. The reason for that is if you have it sitting really low and it hits the wheelie bar, it'll decompress and lift the front up. So to have it almost topped out enough to where you can adjust the springs, but not a lot of up travel, will allow it to where when you hit the wheelie bar, the car stops and it keeps the front end down. So front end all the way down. The other thing I didn't mention is front end's all the way down, rear end's all the way up. When the travel upwards, I know it's kind of hard to see on this camera, but when the travel goes up, the chassis is completely level. So I don't want the chassis going like this to catch a lot of air at the end. 132 feet, if your chassis is up, your front end's up, it's coming off the ground. So it needs to stay level. So I've limited the front end to just a little bit of travel where all the way down it doesn't hit the body on the ground, and all the way up it's about level with topped out in the back. A lot of people are running a lot stiffer suspension, I think, than I am, and I think that might be the way to go. It seems like the looser the suspension, the more it handles kind of a rough track. So super smooth track, I'd probably stiffen it up. Wheelie bar length. I've seen cars with huge wheelie bars and like ladder type bars on the back with double wheels. Those are more rear motor type stuff. This one has a 9-inch wheelie bar, single wheel on the back. It doesn't really, if it's tuned right, it doesn't even really run on the wheelie bar, so I haven't spent a lot of time. But in my opinion, I think a double wheel wheelie bar and a ladder bar, or even a wheel that doesn't grip like the metal bearing, is probably a good idea, because if I get a little bit off on the wheelie bar or alignment, thing shoots off sideways when it hits the wheelie bar. So to have, I haven't spent a ton of time on the wheelie bar. This one works pretty good. But one of the things that is important is length. So they have all sorts of lengths of wheelie bars, and there's rarely a rule on how long it needs to be. So I found the longest wheelie bar I could find, and it's like that in real drag racing too. The longer the wheelie bar, the better the leverage. When it hits the wheelie bar, it wants to unload the tire. And the longer the bar, the less it unloads. So if the bar is this long and it hits the wheelie bar, the tire's coming off the ground and the race is done. If you exaggerate and hit a 2-foot long wheelie bar, you'd really have to lift up on the car to lift the rear end of the car off the ground. So there's it's just like a ratio or a leverage thing where the longer the wheelie bar, the less it unloads the tire when it hits it. So I'm trying to run the longest wheelie bar possible. I know there's some cars, especially rear motors, that run the wheelie bar almost all the way down the track. I don't even think I'm on the wheelie bar at all most of the way down when it's tuned right. Yeah, Jay, I think it's RC Innovations, I think. There's a few companies out there that make a pretty good bar, and they all look about the same. The last thing I wanted to show, so this is kind of an unconventional car. It's a belt-driven car. I'll show you more of the conventional car. It's not completely together, but I wanted to show you something on it. That's important. So this is more of the standard style gearbox car. This is also a 22 4.0 car, exact same car as the other one. The only thing that's the difference is a gearbox. And this isn't a standard gearbox, it's 4-gear. So it's rotating the opposite way. Normally the motor sits in this way. With this one, the rotation of the motor pushes on the back tire. If you sit there and look at it and you think about, well, if the armature spins one way or the rotor spins one way, the can wants to rotate the other way. The way that the can rotates when this accelerates pushes down on the back of the car. That's it's normally used for a loose dirt track, short course stuff, and it works really good for drag racing because it's giving you this hit or bite more than the 3-gear that spins the opposite way and wants to push the front end down. This one wants to push the rear end down and lift the front. So that's a good option. I've tried all the different gearboxes that I know of. This one works the best. And on this gearbox is a slipper. The other problem I was having is I'd blow through the slipper. So this is a B5 style slipper that good guy Frank over in Tucson, Greer, hey Frank, gave me the information on this slipper, and it's a 3-disc instead of a 2-disc. I've been really happy with it. He was nice enough he was killing us with his car slipping down the track in a very controlled way. So I had to ask, what are you using? You're really moving out. And he showed me the slipper he was running. So I've run this ever since, and it's been excellent. I can't recommend this enough if you're running. I mean, we're running huge horsepower, so the standard slipper just isn't quite enough, it seems like. So that's my Gearbox car. I think that's all I really need to talk about this, but put this one back. So next thing I wanted to get into a little bit is timing curves and transmitter settings. So the timing, because the slipper works so good, I'm basically just putting in the maximum timing curve I can on the ESC that I'm running, which is 30 degrees. It's a 8 scale style RX-8. So I'm putting the most amount of timing in it, and then I have the motor set to between 20 to 30 degrees, depending on the motor. Right now I'm running a 3.5, and it's set at 30 degrees, so I'm putting 60 degrees total in a 3.5, basically as fast as I can put it in. It seems like this is correct in real drag racing too. You want to take all the power out in the beginning of the run and put a massive amount of power in at the end. So one of the ways we figured out how to do this is dual rate. And at least on my transmitter, I'm running an M12 using race modes. So I have it to where I'm not actually pulling the trigger on the radio. My race mode 1 is set to 0 EPA or 0 dual rate. So there's 0 throttle. I hit a button and it goes to my launch setting, which is anywhere from 60 to 100%. And then I hit another race mode that's all of it. So I can control really good reaction time on when you launch, because you're not pulling a trigger, you're just hitting a button. When you hit the first button, you can control how hard you want to hit it. So if it's 50% or however you have it tuned, and then once the car looks stable, you hit 100% or whatever your next stage is. And you can have, I think, up to 5 different R modes on the radio. So that helps you run very little power on the beginning and a ton of power at the end when you're going 50, 60 plus miles an hour. On a Vegas race flashlight start, I wouldn't be pulling a trigger when that light flashes. I would be hitting a button because my reaction time is going to be a lot better. So I think that's about it on the important parts of transmitter. You can turn down your steering rate and other things like that, but the main goal is very little power off the line and a ton of power at the end. The other thing I did want to say is I think my torque setting is between the number 3 to 5 on an RX-8. So I'm pulling out a little bit of torque, but not much. It's pretty much all there because all the power goes through the slipper anyway. So next thing I want to talk about was weight and tuning. This is probably, as far as the weight movement goes, is probably the biggest tuning tool that I use. So when you look at my car, I have a weight block in the front. Difference between off-road or on-road racing and drag racing is those have rotation characteristics where you got to go around a corner, and moving the weight in rotates the car fast, moving the weight out rotates the car slow, and you can tune based on that. With these cars, I found that you want all the weight on the ends. That's why I run the shocks on the back, and I have the weight that I'm adding completely up front. If I could put it more forward, I would. If the car does get a little unsettled, it rotates slower because all the weight of the car is on the outsides. I normally either have, this car isn't as adjustable, but I have a way to move the battery from all the way back to all the way forward against the servo. And I even was thinking about coming up with a front end that I could mount the battery between the shocks all the way up front, because I'm running a super tiny, I think I got it here. I was running, maybe I don't. I got one. I was running these batteries that were super small, like this size. So this battery's 100 and something grams lighter. It's made by Max Amps. And I didn't say, but I should say, I'm not sponsored by anybody. I have no I'm not biased to anything. I've never really been sponsored because I want to run anything that works good. Ryan, let me see, you got it. What's the weight versus the gearbox? It's a good question. So this car, the way it sits and the way I ran it on Sunday, it weighs 2,030 grams, and that's heavy. My gearbox car with this battery, fully dressed with a body, weighed 1,730. And I almost think it's too light. I don't think weight affects the car like I thought it was going to be. I thought it'd be way faster and light, and at least at 132 feet, it doesn't seem to be, because I can't control it at the end with the aerodynamics. And that's one of the subjects I'll get into a little bit later with aerodynamics, but I don't have the right aerodynamics to be that light and be able to go 60 plus miles an hour. It just flies. So weight bias. The way I tune a car is, there's a couple different tire sizes. The tire that's here is a short course. This tire is probably the smallest. It's a DE tire. This is actually my favorite tire. And you can see the diameter difference is huge. So low track conditions, I raise the car, or low traction conditions, I'll raise the car up to give kind of a pendulum effect to let it transfer weight to the back. The more the traction, the more the car goes low. Hey, Cody. I will, if like on Sunday, because I knew I was going to get a lot of traction, I ran the car pretty low. I either screw the eyelet up or down in the rear shock to change the ride height. And so what I'll do is I'll run and see what the car does at as high as I can get it and no weight on the front. And if it wheelies, then I'll add weight to the front or lower the back, one of the two, depending on where it's at in the tune. As I add weight, if the front end goes down, stays down, but the tire doesn't slip, I'll put more power in it with the EPA or the dual rate, right? With the R modes. And if the front end comes back up, then I add more weight. I keep doing this process until the tire slips. When the tire slips, I know that's the max effort of the tire, and I'll back off on the power a little bit. I don't want the front to come off the ground. I want the car to stay controlled and settled off the wheelie bar. So that's kind of how I tune. It seems like every road is different, and it takes that kind of seesaw to get the max effort of the tire. You know, I've watched these guys do huge wheelies down the track, or the car instantly slips, and if it doesn't get enough traction, then you raise the car up and let the pendulum effect push down on the tire harder. If it wheelies really hard, add weight, and don't add it in the middle. Add it all the way up in front as far as you can. 50 grams on the front is like having 100 in the middle, pretty close. So you want to add as little weight as possible and all the way up front. The other tuning thing that I do is every tire is different. When I'm going to go through building tires, but when you launch a car and it turns one way, it could be because the tire diameter on one side's a little bigger than the other. It could be that the pressure, I weigh the car to make sure that the scale is correct on all four tires. Even with all that correct, if the tire diameter is different, it's going to pull one way. So I can adjust the spring in the back, and if it turns one way, I'll add weight on the side that it's turning into to put more traction. So if it was turning this way going down the track, I'd add weight or spring pressure to this side until I get it to go straight. And usually, even with different tire diameters, I can get it to go straight as long as my base weight and my base setup is all neutral. If you have a bent chassis or if you have something mechanically wrong, you're not going to get it to go straight. But tire diameter can be overcome with spring pressure on either side. I know I've heard some people have adjustable sway bars that do kind of the same thing. You're just putting more pressure on one tire than the other to get it to go straight. So it's kind of my tuning thing. Let's see what the next thing is here. So motor location is part of tuning, and I've always ran mid-motor. Hey, Warren. A lot of people are running rear motor. A lot of people are running mid-motor now, and I think this is the first that I know of what's kind of like a front motor car. Rear motor, when it lifts and comes off on the wheelie bar, it unloads the tire. I never thought that would be a good design, so I always went mid-motor, where when you lift the car, you're lifting weight and pushing down on the tire. And then this design is more of a extreme where I have all the weight up front. And when it does a wheelie, it's lifting a lot of weight and it pushes down really hard on the rear tire. So I think it's probably, I mean, I'm biased because this is all I know, but I'd have a hard time, traction being equal, thinking that a motor hanging off the rear would compete in a high traction environment. The more traction you get, the more weight you need forward. So low traction stuff, my opinion, I think rear motors are going to be solid. They're going to launch really hard. But as traction level and tire technology and sauces get better, I think weight's going to move further and further forward. I mean, I want to, if I could, I'd put my battery on the front bumper and the motor on the front bumper. So my opinion, I know people will probably argue that, but that's just my opinion. Do you make a template to drill the chassis? Well, Matt, I would, but I'm kind of stopping on this because it's become illegal in a few areas and I don't want to continue the development of this car because until the class rules are fully set, I might have wasted my time in making it all together. That's a whole nother story. So next thing I want to go into, and this is kind of cool, and I don't mean to be going super fast, but I got a ton of stuff in my mind I want to get out to you guys. So go on to the next thing. It's aerodynamics. So front end aerodynamics, one of the cool things about this is the car, when they go so fast, I mean, last Sunday my car flew off the ground about 8 feet at, a really fast speed. Aerodynamics are wrong. So one of the things I came up with was this tire, and this tire is a standard low-C wheel that I cut the back off. This was also an idea of Frank Greer. I'll give you credit for this. This was a genius way to make a very light, efficient, yeah, that's funny, man. Very light and efficient front tire. These tires take about 80 grams off the front. It's hard rubber, so the rolling resistance is next to nothing. And I think one of the most important things it does is it allows me to do this. Let me grab a body. Okay, standard Nova body, tall, right? That's full size. I've cut this a little bit, but basically full size body. The limit of how low you can get the body is how tall the tire is so it doesn't hit the top, and how far this comes down so it doesn't hit the ground. With this tire, this is the body that I run on this car, and if you look, I've cut, better example. I've cut the front, see if I can get this to show you guys, to about, I cut about 20% off the bottom. I cut the whole fairing off the bottom. The tire is small enough where I can put this on. Let's see if I can show you here. But basically the tire is small enough where I can put it on, it doesn't rub the top, and I get this super low profile of the front end. Aerodynamics are much better this way. Hey Dan, this way than with the full-size body. And every body I've done that to. So the other body I've run, notice that I'm running a standard wing. This is what I ran on Sunday, no wing on the back. And if the clock's correct, it's the fastest mile an hour I've ever turned, and I think it might be the fastest anybody's ever turned last Sunday. So no wing on it. I think the wing rules are in the noise. They're for stability, but if you need it, the run's over anyway. So the other type of body I've tried is this, and this has a huge wing on the back. Same thing on the front. I've cut it way down so it sits super low. You can see the standard tire rubs on the fender. I put little tires on it. Doesn't rub anymore. I can get the body really low. I think there's a little bit of stability with this huge wing on the back, but there's also a lot of weight. So I haven't solved that equation yet, but I've tried just about every body. Tried big wings, no wing. There's not a huge difference. The main part is keeping the front end down, keeping the air out from underneath it. So it doesn't fly off the ground. I just saw a really cool design online where a guy had this front bumper that comes out the front that it can kind of be used as a splitter. So awesome design. If I were to change something, I would copy a lot of that design. It's incredible looking car. Some rules say you can run a splitter. Some rules say you can't alter the front. So I've kind of been not messing with the front end to run a splitter because I don't want to have the problem of not following the rules. All of these aerodynamics and the low front and the big wing, and it all comes into effect, in my opinion, after 50 miles an hour. Below 50, I don't think there's enough wind resistance to blow the car off the ground or have any instability. It's just 132 feet, quarter mile stuff. We run a lot of eighth mile stuff here too, and I just run a standard as light as I can body, and aerodynamics really don't play a factor. Let's see. So next subject's tires. I've spent a ton of money. I've tried all sorts of different types of tires. For short course, I was turned on to these type of rims by the west side of town. They're a beadlock. I like them. Gearing, I'm running 2276. I've run anywhere from 20 to 2676. It blows through every gear. It doesn't seem to matter. The cars aren't really sensitive with so much power and slipper working. I get close on a gear and just run it. It doesn't seem to make a big difference. Okay, tires. I like these tires for short course because they grab the wheel all the way around the bead. I can never glue it exactly straight, but with these, when I balance, it seems like these make the tire one really true. So thanks Jay Conway, he kind of showed me these. I know Kyle and all the guys on the west side, when I first started running over there, they were running these tires and I'm like, what the hell are they doing? And I see now these run really good. So I think this is a Proline tire or wheel. And I've had one fail where the rubber pulled out, but I think it was my fault. It wasn't tightened all the way down. So Ryan, that's what I was talking about is I've tried, like the tire that's on here is the DE. This is what I ran this weekend, first time trying them. This is the Phenom tire, and I did have one fail. I don't know if you can see it, but it actually roasted the sidewall on it a little bit because beadlock pulled out. But I think it was my fault. It wasn't completely tight. I tightened it down, put it back in and tightened it down and didn't have a problem since with the fastest mile an hour I've ever run. So I don't think there's a problem with it locking down, but I did have it fail once. Okay, so tires. This is my favorite tire. It's the soft, I think it's D30 or D40, the super soft compound DE tire. And this with tape inside, I'm using Gorilla type tape, this stuff, and I don't use it full width. I tape just down the center. If you tape too wide, it starts wrinkling and then you can't get a true tire. So I do have a tire balancer, like a static balancer, and I'll spin the tire, make sure it's extremely true because these things are really moving out. Any type of imperfection in the tire makes a huge difference in traction because the tire hops. The tapes will fail. So this is my favorite. There's belted tires like these that I haven't thoroughly tested, but they run super smooth. I just don't think they have the launch traction that this does. I've also tried these are the Phenoms. These are clays. I was running softs this weekend, but I think the softs are better for traction as long as your tape holds up and they don't deform. But with this new sauce that has kind of been found out, I don't think tire compound matters at all. And I'll show you. I'll show you this. So I've sauced this tire to give you an example of how sticky this sauce is. It sticks to my hand. I mean, it's a cold tire. The sauce sits on top. And if anybody's listening to anything of this video, this is where you're gonna go from running 290s to 250s, at least here on Coys Road out in the East Valley. This sauce is almost unfair. So this is a cold tire, unprepped. I've tested it for 2 weekends. It's fairly new to me, but this Sunday was the first time I've ever ran it. I ran it on a tire, this Phenom tire that has a contact patch that is really small. I don't like the tire for the fact that it's really round. I'm only running on the inside 30% of the tire. This sauce worked so good that it actually stuck the car to the ground. I mean, the car, I had to physically pull the car off the ground on the starting line when it sat there. I was able to, normally on the west side of town, I'm running like 55% timing out of the hole or EPA, and like 70 or 80, after it gets out of the hole. Once I dialed the car in where it went straight with these tires, I kind of chose this tire to see if I could get it to work. And it's a strong tire, and I knew the car was going to go pretty fast. So I was able to hit 100% on a 3.5 at 58 or 60 degrees timing. It stuck everything it had. And the thing was so sticky, I noticed throughout the day that after I sauced the tire 6 or 7 times, the car would, for the first foot or two, not hardly move and then take off like a bat out of hell. And I found out later on, it was the tire sticking so hard on the road that it was like turning through tar or molasses before it got some contaminants in the tire and was able to just, haul ass. So I think it's actually too strong because it's stopping the motor from spinning the tire. But once it went, the trap said it did 71 miles an hour. I looked at Coy to ask him if it was right. He said it should be right. The other lane was right. I don't know of a faster run. It did like 236 or 237, so the ET wasn't what I was hoping for, which it was still a good ET, but with that mile an hour, I think it should have went well into the 220s, and I did that with a tire that I don't necessarily like. So you put that on this tire that's flat, has a lot of surface, and is short, where I can lower the car down without getting a bad angle on the drive shaft, and the thing's going to be a missile. So my dilemma was, I have this sauce. I'm going to show you what it is. Here, you ready for this, Jay? This sauce is called, I don't know if you can see that, it's probably backwards, but it's called Ultra Blue. It's a real car traction compound. Jay Conway, his company he works for, sells it. And I really think if you don't have it, you're not going to compete on Coys Road with people that do. How I found out about it was there was a longtime friend, very competitive guy, that found a sauce that just annihilated the class. And I was bound and determined, being competitive, to try and figure out what it was or get something similar. And it took me a few months. I'll kind of show you, but it took me all of this testing of all of these sauces. It's a lot of money in time, research and development, and trying to find out a sauce. But I found like Trinity Tweak works pretty good, and I've run some on-road stuff. So I tried on-road stuff, and I tried BK, Brian Kenwalt stuff, and I couldn't get the traction of this guy that was, he was really fast. He was the record holder in the class. So just by accident, I stumbled across this Ultra Blue. I tried it, and it was like, oh my gosh. So I had the dilemma of, and I even contacted I think one of the leading guys in drag racing, Tim Smith, and I texted him and said, hey, I got this sauce, and I don't know, it's such a big advantage. I don't know, do I sell it? Do I just use it? What do I do with this information? And he was asking what it was, and And I kind of figured out that this main reason for the video was it's such a big advantage that it's a game changer for this class. And I think if it's not out, it'll ruin the class. And it shouldn't be about who's got the best chemical. It should be about who's got the best car. So I've tried it on multiple roads. It usually works. I haven't had enough testing time to know if it works on every road, but after saucing like 7 or 8 times with it, I can't imagine it would not work on any road. It's so strong that it lays on top of the tire, and it doesn't matter the tire compound because you're not getting traction out of the rubber, you're getting traction out of the sauce layer on the top. So I wanted everybody to know how to get it, how I'm using it, and kind of level the playing field for people so they wouldn't get discouraged on, if they're a new person coming to the track and their car's running 3.0 and they're sliding all over the place and a guy just rockets down the track at 220 or 230, I think it's going to discourage the new people and you're not going to have the turnout. So, I run an unlimited class and there's not a lot of competition in it. And yeah, I can go set the record in the class or I can, be number 1 on the list, but it's unfair. It just isn't as much fun. I'd rather see a class that is competitive and everybody's on an even playing field and traction's everything. So, okay, that's probably enough on the sauce. But so my last subject, I think, is what helps and hurts the class, and that kind of it's how I'm talking about the sauce leads into this, where I think if you find out something that gives you an edge, that's the competitive edge of any racing that I've ever done. But when you find out something that is game-changing or innovative, it should be shared. And one of the things that I try and do is, this car that I built is all factory low-C parts. There's nothing custom. Anybody can build this. It's 7 holes drilled in the bottom of the car. You can use the template of the bottom of the belt drive to drill the holes. It's somebody anybody can make, and I like pushing the edge of the rules, but I also want to share it and make sure people can build it. So I think if you have to go behind a corner to sauce your tire, or you're doing something that you don't want anybody to know, you should really think about should I be sharing this with the group to make the class better. And so I thought this was the right thing to do. And I think with the setup information that I've given, the sauce and the tire information, a new guy could go out and run 250s or 260s and be pretty competitive. That's I guess my goal. I think I'm gonna, as far as the rules go, there's been a lot of controversy on what's legal and what's not, and I'm the type of guy that I'm a pretty innovative guy. I like making new stuff, and I don't think the rules are defined enough to not upset people on what I try and build. So I'm gonna take a break for a little while, let the rules kind of get really defined, and then I might be back to see what I can build. But before I did that, I wanted to share with everybody everything that I've learned over the last year of hard work trying to figure out the fastest way to make a Street Outlaw car. I think I'm close to being one of the faster guys. I think it went to 36 at 71 miles an hour, a little bit over. I don't know the mile an hour is correct, but I know it did a bunch of mid 60 mile an hour runs. And the last run I did that stuck everything was definitely faster than one of those. So I'd like to think that 71 is real, but I didn't back it up, so I don't know. So I think that's about all I had. I couldn't really catch any questions. The screen I'm using is for some of trying this, but you guys are welcome to text or email or message me. Be happy to help anybody out. I think that's about it. Thanks, everybody. Any questions before I go? I don't see anything. All right. Good luck to everybody.